Thanks for joining us for today's News at Noon. I'm Drew Carney. The search continues this afternoon for a man who's been missing since yesterday after the boat he was on capsized on the Columbia River. The Hood River County Sheriff's Office says it happened just before noon on Wednesday. There were 6 other people on board. All 6 were pulled out of the water and 2 of them were taken to the hospital. But again, the 7th person is still missing now more than 24 hours after the boat capsized.
It happens. It's rare. It seems like every few years we lose one, you know. These guys, you know, everybody's like they're fishermen, they're guides. These guys, they sacrifice a lot to do what they do, to live on the water 300 days a year. You know, they're putting their lives in danger every day coming out here. It could be a calm day and all it takes is a slip overboard and that's the last of your day, you know.
Several agencies from both Oregon and Washington are involved in today's search, along with the Coast Guard. In Clark County, law enforcement arrested an armed man who caused the Vancouver neighborhood to shelter in place late last night into early this morning. Sheriff's deputies first encountered the man outside the county jail, where they say he pointed a gun at himself before he took off on an e-bike. Authorities eventually surrounded him on Northeast 26th Court, and the SWAT team talked him into surrendering. The gun turned out to be a pellet gun. He was taken to the hospital and then later booked into jail. The shelter in place, by the way, was lifted around 1 a.m. Sherwood police say they arrested a man accused of stealing several packs of Pokemon cards from a Target store. After running the VIN number on his car, it turns out that was stolen as well. Police say they found knives and meth in the car. The man faces several charges, including unlawful use of a motor vehicle, theft, and drug possession. Bryan Kohberger is expected to make his first court appearance in Boise later this afternoon. Kohberger is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022. His attorneys filed a motion to let him wear street clothes during his public hearings instead of jail attire. It was just a few weeks ago that the Idaho Supreme Court agreed to move his trial from Moscow, Idaho, where the murders took place, to Boise. Hurricane Helene could reach Category 4 status before it makes landfall in Florida later today. This hurricane crew flew directly into the eye of Helene to gather more information about the storm. Their trip showed the stark contrast between the calm center of Helene compared to its turbulent outer bands. Forecasts suggest that Tallahassee, Florida, could catch the worst of Helene. That's where NBC's Jay Gray brings us the latest on the storm's track.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about where we are with this storm. Still churning in the Gulf, rushing toward the west coast of Florida and really gaining speed and momentum. It's those warm waters, mid-80s to near 90 in the Gulf, that act as rocket fuel for this storm. The National Hurricane Center saying this one's going to be a beast, that it's going to have winds gusting well over 100 miles an hour at landfall. And they warn about what could be, and I'm quoting here, a catastrophic and deadly storm surge, as high as 20 feet in some areas.
This area has not had a major hurricane hit in quite some time, and certainly nobody in recent memory has seen a storm of this magnitude that has hit.
And time to prepare, it's just about over at this point, and so those who haven't moved to a shelter, moved to higher ground or outside the strike zone, they're going to have to ride this thing out. Now, we know that you've got power teams as well as response and recovery teams staged just outside the strike zone. They are ready to move in, but can't do that until the coast is clear. And in areas like Tallahassee, a little inland, they still expect to see major hurricane winds here. And the fear is that's going to bring down a lot of the old trees, oaks that are hundreds of years old, and that'll pull power lines down as well. In some of the hardest hit areas, they expect that they're going to have to cut their way through to get to people who may be there to restore power, and that could take not days, but weeks in some areas. There is a big concern with the intensity, the magnitude of this storm. Forecasters saying it could still be hurricane strength well inland, even as it crosses into Georgia. The wind field with this massive system, its footprint about 500 miles or so. That's the latest right now on Helene. I'm Jay Gray in Tallahassee. Now back to you.
All right, from Jay Gray, we go to Rod Hill in our KGW Weather Center. Obviously, Rod, this is something that you're tracking as well.
Yeah, Jay, really perfectly stated how large this storm is. So you can plainly see on the radar imagery the eye of the hurricane Helene right here. And of course, here's Florida. It's this Big Bend area of Florida, or maybe the northern Gulf Coast of Florida, that seems to be the target for landfall. We've already seen heavy rain bands extending up into Georgia and the Florida Panhandle. So here's the very latest update. Sustained winds. This is now considered a major hurricane, with it being Category 3 strength. Sustained winds around the eye wall, 120 miles per hour. Here it is this evening at 8 o'clock East Coast time, just offshore from that Big Bend area of Florida. Late evening, it looks like before midnight, it starts to make landfall. This is early tomorrow morning, making its way still as a hurricane up into Atlanta. So that, I mean, if this is correct, that is significant winds, well over 100 miles per hour, moving into the metro area of Atlanta later overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. Eventually, the storm Friday will weaken during the day and into the evening, become just a low pressure center up into Kentucky. A lot of different ways to look at this. This is kind of a cool way. Here's the eye on Futurecast. This is would be 10:19 East Coast time, right there in that Big Bend to north coast, Gulf Coast of Florida. Here it is early tomorrow morning, still a hurricane near Atlanta, and then eventually making its way with what remnant rains up into Tennessee and Kentucky. So more on nightly news on that storm, and here on KGW, I'm sure Matt will be tracking that tonight starting at 4 o'clock. We're at 63. You see the sun behind me. It's also clearing up into southwest Washington. Here's Lewis River Golf Course up in Woodland. So at this point, all of the cameras are showing increasing sunshine. Looks like it's going to be a nice afternoon for you. 74 at 5 p.m. Drew?
All right, Rod, we'll check back in with you in a few minutes. Right now, though, back to some local headlines. Portland City Council has signed off on a plan to make some much-needed improvements to a stretch of Columbia Boulevard, and the Oregon Humane Society will foot most of the bill. So the Humane Society's Northeast Portland shelter sits on this stretch of Columbia Boulevard. Staff members there say they have seen dozens of accidents near the shelter over the years. So the nonprofit agreed to pay most of the $3 million to improve the road because the city says it doesn't have the money for it.
I wish we weren't paying anything. We could spend that money on spay and neuter and getting justice for abused animals, but to get more people to have access and to save more lives is really the purpose of it.
With these improvements, there will also eventually be an additional TriMet bus route and stop right there along Columbia. Project leaders hope to have it all completed by August of 2026.